My name is Calic. I was 10 when I saw blood in the snow, right where they said Sister Marlene had gone to the light. That was the moment I realized, this wasn't a family, it was a prison. They stole my name, my past, and nearly my life. But I escaped. And I came back to burn it all down with the truth. Before we begin, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that uncovers the truth hidden in silence. Now, what would you do if the people who raised you weren't your family, but your captors? This is the true story of how I escaped the cult that stole my life. I was 10 when Sister Marlene vanished. They said she'd been called home. But I saw the blood near the snowdrift. They rang the bell 6 times that morning. 6 times meant someone had passed, a return to the light, they called it. Death wasn't mourned in our community, it was celebrated. The belief was that we were only visitors here on earth, serving our purpose before ascending into the eternal glow of the northern light, but I wasn't celebrating. I was staring at the red bloom in the snow, half covered by a dusting of fresh powder behind the chapel. I had seen it at dawn, before chores began, when the world was still and quiet, so quiet you could hear your own heartbeat in the cold. They said Sister Marlene had gone peacefully in her sleep. That she had been chosen, elevated. But the blood didn't line up with that story. No one explains blood like that. Sister Marlene had always been different. While the others whispered prayers and bowed their heads, she looked people in the eye. She smiled at me. Once, she even gave me a small carved bear, said it reminded her of who I could become, if you keep your eyes open. A week before she disappeared, she pulled me aside during wood gathering. Her voice trembled as she spoke. Calic, she said, eyes darting around, have you ever wondered where the others go? The ones who leave and never come back. I said no. I had wondered, of course. But you weren't supposed to say it out loud. They tell us they go to Fairbanks. That they've found jobs or been reassigned. But it's a lie. I've seen the ledger in Father Eliah's office. Names are crossed out. Red ink. Like the mark of Cain. I asked her what that meant, but she just shook her head and said, don't let them take your mind, Calic. Not all families are sacred. Then she hugged me like she was already saying goodbye. The next morning, she was gone. They said she'd been called home, her voice now part of the celestial choir. We prayed and fasted. My mother wept, not tears of grief, but of devotion. She said Sister Marlene was lucky, but I saw the blood. And later, I saw something else, Brother Amos dragging something heavy in the early hours, wrapped in a thick canvas tarp. He didn't see me crouched in the woodshed. But I saw him. I saw the way he kept looking over his shoulder, the nervous way he moved. That was the first time I knew something was wrong. That not everyone who vanished had found the light, some just stopped existing. That winter, my childhood cracked. I no longer saw the compound as home. It was a cage of snow and secrets, and Sister Marlene's disappearance was just the first truth buried beneath it. Speaking during meals was a sin. Asking questions was worse. After Sister Marlene disappeared, the silence felt heavier. At breakfast, we sat at long wooden tables inside the dining hall. No one dared chew too loudly. Forks scraped plates, knees remained together, eyes down. The room was filled with the clinking of silverware and the occasional muffled cough. I didn't even know how to turn it on at first. But I'd stare at it like it was magic. Proof that something else was out there. Something louder than this silence, that radio, and the driver's smile, opened a door in my mind. One the elders didn't want open. A door Sister Marlene tried to show me before she vanished. Inside the cult, questions could kill you. But silence could bury you alive, and now, I had a question that wouldn't go away. What if they were wrong? My mother wasn't mine. And I was never chosen. I was taken. It started with a loose floorboard behind Father Eliah's office. I wasn't supposed to be there. No one was. The elders said that part of the main house was sacred, the heart of the light. They called it. Only the anointed could enter. But when the generator failed during a storm and the compound went dark, I saw my chance. The others were focused on repairs. I crept through the hall barefoot, heart pounding in my ears. The air was colder near his door, like the building itself knew it was hiding something. Inside, the office smelled like tobacco and old leather. A massive desk sat at the center, flanked by bookshelves filled with dusty scripture and hand-bound ledgers. I stepped carefully, my eyes scanning everything. That's when I noticed the floorboard behind the desk, slightly warped, like it had been lifted before. I pried it up with the corner of a broken ruler. What I found wasn't treasure. It was truth, folders, dozens of them, sealed in plastic bags, labeled with initials. Some had photographs, birth certificates, hospital bracelets. Others had state seals and stamps from social services offices, and then I saw it, one labeled KT, Kalik. Tajan. My full name. I opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside was a picture of me as a baby in a hospital crib. A birth certificate from Anchorage General Hospital, and a file stamped wards of the state. My mother's name wasn't Anna. It was Rebecca Flynn. My place of birth wasn't the commune. I had been removed from my birth family, neglect was scribbled in red ink, and placed in temporary custody, but I was never adopted. I had vanished from the system, just disappeared. I felt sick. I flipped through more folders, more faces I recognized. Elga. Thomas. Even little Sura, who couldn't be older than 6. None of us were born here. None of us were chosen. We had been taken, stolen children raised in a lie. I don't remember leaving the office. I barely remember hiding the folder in the lining of my coat. All I remember is sitting on my bunk that night, staring at the other kids as they slept, wondering how many knew, how many even suspected. The next morning, I looked at Anana and saw not a mother, but a mask. Her gentle touch, her bedtime songs, her whispered blessings, it had all been a role. She hadn't given me life, she had stolen it from someone else, and she'd let them rename me, reshape me, fold me into their twisted version of family. I used to believe I was chosen, but now I knew, I was a prisoner, and every smile in this place was part of the cage. We were to be baptized in ash and blood. I knew then, I had to run. The ceremony was always spoken about in whispers. Not because it was secret, but because it was sacred. Only the most devout could participate. Each winter, when the snow piled high and the sky turned violet with cold, Father Elijah would lead the chosen into the woods, beyond the boundary markers, past the frozen creek, deep into the birch forest where no outsiders ever went. We never saw what happened out there. Only the smoke rising in slow, steady columns. This year, I was chosen. They called it an honor. They said I'd reached spiritual maturity. That I would carry the light outward. At first, I didn't understand what that meant. But the way the elders looked at me, too long, too proud, it didn't feel like praise. It felt like a sentence. 3 days before the ceremony, Sister Kaya pulled me aside during meal prep. She pressed a small piece of cloth into my hand, soaked in oil, with a charred edge. Her eyes were wide, panicked. "Do not go into the woods," she whispered. "They don't baptize. They brand. They burn." She was gone the next day. They said she chose exile. That night, I listened to the radio beneath my bed. Static. Faint voices. A song I didn't know but couldn't stop crying to. Outside, snowflakes hit the window like ash. I couldn't sleep. The next morning, they gave me white robes lined with deer fur and a carved wooden talisman, shaped like the sun. I was to wear both during the ceremony. The robes would be purified by flame, they said. My skin would be anointed with smoke. My body a vessel of devotion, but the final instruction chilled me: you will not return until the light deems you ready. That meant isolation. Maybe days. Maybe longer. Or maybe not at all. That night, I packed the essentials: stolen matches, a small knife, my hidden folder, and the battered radio. I wrapped them in cloth and sealed it inside the lining of my coat. When morning came, the chosen were loaded into a sled caravan pulled by snowmobiles. We were blindfolded, to let the light guide us. I counted the seconds, the turns. I listened for the shift in snow under the runners. And when I felt the caravan stop for the first prayer, I made my move. I slipped from the back of the sled and vanished into the trees. No one noticed, not yet. The woods were deathly quiet. The snow deep. The cold cut into me like knives. But I didn't stop, because I finally understood, this wasn't a ceremony, it was a purge, and if I didn't escape now, I wouldn't leave the woods alive. Ash. Blood. Smoke. The light didn't save people, it consumed them, and I was done burning. The night I ran, I thought the cold would kill me before they did. I didn't know where I was going, only that it had to be away. The snow was waist deep in places, biting at my legs with every stumble. Behind me, the chanting had stopped. That was worse than hearing it. Silence meant they'd noticed. Meant they were looking. I kept moving, the forest twisted around me. Familiar and foreign all at once. During work duty, we'd gathered firewood in the outskirts. But never this deep. The trees here were taller, older, like they had secrets of their own. Their branches groaned with the weight of the snow, and shadows danced between them, tricking my eyes. My breath came in ragged clouds. My boots, too thin for the terrain, soaked through quickly. Frost bit at my fingers, even beneath the mittens I'd stolen. My ears burned, then went numb. Every part of me screamed to stop, to collapse into the white and let it all end, but stopping meant death, and worse, capture. At some point, I crossed a frozen creek. The ice cracked beneath me, and I thought I was gone. One leg plunged in up to the knee. The pain was blinding. I crawled out and kept moving, wet and shaking, each step a silent scream. I don't remember falling. Only the snow coming up fast, the sky spinning, and my chest tightening like it couldn't hold air anymore. Then came the voices, not real ones. Echoes. Whispers of Marlene, of Sister Kaya, of the supply driver who smiled like he'd seen freedom. They told me to get up. Told me I mattered. Told me to live. I don't know if I did it for them. Or out of spite. Or just because I was too angry to die, but I crawled. Half blind, frostbitten, dragging my body like it was no longer mine. That's when I saw him, a shape in the trees. At first, I thought it was another hallucination. But then came the crunch of snow under heavy boots, the glint of a rifle barrel, the orange blaze of a hunter's vest. He knelt beside me, voice low and calm. "Hey there, kid. You alone?" I tried to answer, but all that came out was a dry rattle. My throat was frozen. My lips cracked. He wrapped me in his coat, muttering something about exposure and how the hell did you get out here? He carried me like I was weightless. The ranger's name was Tom. He radioed for help and got me to a cabin nearby with heat, food, and blankets, but as warmth returned to my body, so did the fear, because if Father Elijah found out I'd escaped, if the others came looking, if Tom didn't believe me, then the cold wouldn't be what killed me, it would be silence, and no one believing the truth. "You've been brainwashed," they said. None of that could be real. The hospital walls were white, too white. They reminded me of the robes they tried to burn me in. I flinched every time a nurse brushed past. The machines beeped steadily, but I didn't trust their rhythm. I didn't trust anything, not even the people trying to help. 2 days after the ranger found me, I was flown to Anchorage. A social worker named Helen asked me gentle questions with sad eyes and a notepad. A doctor took photos of the frostbite and bruises. A therapist asked if I understood the difference between dreams and reality. And when I told them about the ceremony of fire, the chanting in the woods, the babies taken and renamed, they all gave me the same look. That look you give a dog who's been hit too many times and still expects it. "You're safe now," Helen said softly, "but we don't think the things you remember actually happened the way you think they did." They told me it was trauma. That isolation can make children invent stories to survive. They said cults were rare. They said rural communities live differently, but that didn't mean abuse. I wanted to scream. But instead, I reached into my coat, the one I had refused to let them burn, and pulled out the folder, the one marked KT, they stopped speaking when they saw the documents. My birth certificate. The file with the state seal. The red ink. The missing adoption form. And then, slowly, they opened the other folders I had stuffed inside, crumpled and water-damaged but still legible, photos. Real names. Dates. Locations, proof. They didn't say much after that. Just left the room in a hurry. For the first time in days, I felt something like hope. 2 men in suits came the next morning. FBI, they said. They asked sharper questions, and I gave sharper answers. I told them about Father Elijah, about the blindfolded rides into the woods, about Sister Marlene's blood in the snow, about the ledger full of children's names crossed out in red. They didn't comfort me. They didn't doubt me, they just listened, and that, somehow, was worse, because their silence wasn't disbelief, it was confirmation. The next few weeks moved like fog. Investigators swarmed the Wasilla woods. The compound was raided. Drones circled. Dogs barked. And then came the headlines: Alaskan religious commune under federal investigation for child trafficking and abuse. I watched the news in the hospital lounge, surrounded by strangers who now believed me, but belief didn't fix what was broken. I wasn't a survivor. Not yet. I was just a boy who'd lied too well for too long, because it was the only way anyone would finally hear the truth. I confronted her through bulletproof glass. Why did you let them take me? She looked older now, thinner, smaller, like someone had drained the fire out of her. No ceremonial robes. No neat braids. Just an orange jumpsuit and pale hands cuffed together. But I recognized her the second they brought her in, Anana, the woman who raised me, the woman who lied. We were separated by a thick sheet of bulletproof glass in a federal holding center outside Anchorage. A deputy sat nearby, watching through mirrored windows. Anana picked up the phone on her side. And I did the same. Her lips quivered when she saw me. Like she'd been holding back a dam of tears. Calic, she whispered. Her voice cracked like thin ice. I didn't answer right away. I just looked at her. Really looked. At the eyes that used to lull me to sleep, at the hands that used to braid my hair, feed me oatmeal, hold mine during morning prayers. I used to think those hands were made of love, now I knew they were built on betrayal. Why did you let them take me? I asked. She flinched, pressing her fingers against the glass like she wanted to reach me. I didn't have a choice. You always had a choice, I said flatly. She swallowed hard. I was 17 when they brought me in. My real name is Lena. I tried to leave. Twice. The first time, they locked me in a root cellar for a week. The second time. Her eyes filled. They made me watch as they reassigned another girl's baby. They said if I left again, I'd disappear, and so would my son. You. My stomach twisted. So you let them take me to save yourself. I thought if I stayed close, I could protect you, she whispered. They promised me you'd be special. That you'd be safe if I obeyed. I laughed, cold and hollow. Safe. They almost burned me alive, Anana. They used us. Stole us. And you stayed. Her eyes brimmed with guilt, but she didn't deny it. I was weak, she said. I was afraid. You should have been afraid for me. She pressed her forehead to the glass. I know. And I will never stop regretting it. The silence between us stretched long and unbearable. I don't know if I hate you, I finally said. But I'll never call you mother again. Tears streamed down her face, but I didn't stay to watch them fall. I hung up the phone. Stood, and walked out before the guard could even signal me. I didn't look back, because she made her choice, and now, I was making mine. Anana, Lena, wasn't in chains because she'd been captured, she'd been in chains long before the bars, she just chose to stay in them, and I chose to break mine. I didn't just survive. I hunted every last piece of them down. It started with a notebook and a cheap laptop in a halfway house outside Anchorage. I was 17, angry, and finally free, but freedom felt hollow without purpose. So I made one. I began with names. Every elder, every brother or sister from the compound who wasn't arrested in the first raid. Some had fled to Canada. Some blended into small towns. One even became a preacher in a rural church, his sermons broadcast on local radio. They thought no one would remember. But I did. I enrolled in community college under a different name. Journalism classes by day, deep web rabbit holes by night. I learned how to ask questions, how to verify records, how to dig without being seen. The folder I had once hidden in the lining of my coat became the foundation of a far bigger archive. I found the others, too, the stolen sons and daughters. Some were still lost in the system, broken or hardened by it. A few had made it out clean. I wrote to them. Visited. Slowly, a network formed, not of vengeance, but of memory. Survivors turned into sources. And sources turned into allies. At 21, I published my first expose. The Light That Burned Us, Inside Alaska's Forgotten Children. It ran in a small independent journal but caught fire online. It named names. Included scanned documents. Voice recordings. Maps. Everything they thought I had forgotten. One of the elders was arrested 2 weeks later. Then another. The church-turned-radio preacher vanished the night his face hit the news. But I tracked him down in Idaho 6 months later, working as a school janitor under a fake name. I gave the evidence to the feds. He was arrested on the spot. Each takedown didn't feel like justice. Not at first. Justice would have been Sister Marlene alive. Kaya safe. Me. Untouched, but it was something. I infiltrated other groups too, offshoots of the original cult, hidden across the Pacific Northwest. They changed names, changed scripture, changed faces. But the rot was always the same. Charisma, control, silence. Always the silence, so I became the voice they feared. I was invited to speak at conferences. Sit on panels, write more. I wore a suit now. I had scars no one could see. But behind every speech, every article, every interview, I burned with one purpose, to make sure they never got away with it again. The compound in Wasilla was eventually sold off. The buildings torn down. But before they bulldozed the chapel, I visited one last time. The altar was rotted through. Ash still clung to the corners. I left a copy of my article on the steps, not for them. For the ghosts. I didn't need to light the place on fire. I was the fire, and I wouldn't stop until every lie they built turned to ash. I stood at the ruins where they burned children's names into wood. The snow was falling gently when I stepped out of the car. Flakes drifted through the trees like ash in slow motion. The air smelled like pine and old silence. Wasilla hadn't changed much. The town still looked like a postcard someone forgot to send. Quiet roads, quiet houses, quiet people. But I wasn't here for them. I was here for the place where my life had nearly ended. The place that used to call itself the Light of the Northern Way. The compound was barely recognizable. The main hall had collapsed under a winter storm. The barracks were nothing but rotting timber and rusted nails. Only the chapel still stood, barely. Its roof sagged inward, and its stained glass windows were gone, replaced by holes and wind, but the steps were still there. The same ones they made us kneel on during punishment, the same ones where I watched Sister Marlene smile at me. One last time, I walked through the shattered door and into the belly of the past. Inside, the air was cold and stale. Snow crept across the floor through holes in the wall. The altar, once polished and proud, was cracked in two, like a lie caught mid-sentence. And behind it, on the far wall, the carvings remained, names, burned into the wood, mine included. I reached out, touched the scarred letters of my false name, Calictasian. The one they gave me after erasing the boy I was born as, and then I heard him, a soft shuffle. Breath-catching, I turned. He sat in the back pew, hunched and shivering beneath a threadbare coat. His beard was white now, his hands trembling. But those eyes, those cold, commanding eyes, hadn't changed, Father Elijah. No followers. No robe. No voice of God. Just an old man left behind by the fire he lit. He didn't speak, and neither did I. There were no words left to say. Not for the years he stole. Not for the children he silenced. Not for the lies he whispered into trembling ears. He looked at me, like he was trying to recognize someone who used to belong to him. But I wasn't that boy anymore. I was the one who escaped. The one who returned, whole, free, unbroken. I turned and walked out without a word. Outside, I reached into my coat and pulled out a small wooden bear. The one Sister Marlene gave me all those years ago. I set it down on the chapel steps, a memorial, a promise, a reminder that even in the darkest winter, some light survives. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need him to suffer. He was already buried, beneath the silence he created. My final act of justice was simple. I lived, and I would never be silent again. If this story struck a chord, don't let it fade. Like this video to support survivor voices and help others find the truth. Subscribe for more real stories of escape, resilience, and justice. Share it with someone who needs to hear that even in the darkest places, freedom is possible, and comment below, have you ever uncovered a truth that changed everything? Your story might help someone else find the courage to tell theirs. Your voice matters.